You're standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a coffee cup, when the world in one eye goes the color of old slate. Just for a moment, maybe 10 seconds. You blink, you rub it with the back of your hand, and then it clears like nothing ever happened. So you finish washing the cup, you pour another cup, and by the time you sit back down at the table, you've already decided it was nothing. I'm here to tell you that wasn't nothing. What you just felt, or something a lot like it, is one of the 5 warnings your brain sends before a stroke. The cruelest thing about these warnings is that they're so brief, so easy to dismiss, that most folks talk themselves out of taking them seriously, right up until the day they can't talk at all. I'm Dr. Thomas Grant, and on this channel we don't dress up bad news in pretty words, and we don't waste your time. Today I'm going to walk you through 5 signs your body gives you before a stroke, sometimes hours before, sometimes a few days before. The third one I want to share with you is going to catch even most family doctors off guard. Stay with me to that one. It changed how I think about this whole subject. If this is your first time here, my name's Dr. Grant. The channel's called Dr. Thomas Grant Senior Health, and the goal we're working toward together is 100,000 subscribers. Where in the country are you watching from today? Drop your state in the comments below. I read those. And if you want practical checklists you can keep on your phone, my Telegram channel is linked in the description. The QR code's right here on screen. Now let me start with something the medical books don't always tell you in plain English. When doctors say stroke, they're actually talking about 2 separate things that happen to share a name. The first kind, the one nobody wants, is when a vessel in the brain tears open and floods the surrounding tissue. The second kind, which is the one we'll focus on today, is when a vessel gets plugged shut. No flood, no bursting, just a closed pipe. And the brain cells behind that closed pipe start to die in about 4 minutes. 85 out of every 100 strokes are this second kind, the plugged pipe kind. Those are the ones that almost always announce themselves first. I want you to understand something about your brain before we go any further. That gray matter between your ears weighs about 3 pounds. 3 pounds, that's it. Smaller than a sack of flour. But it drinks up about 1/5 of all the oxygen you breathe and 1/4 of all the sugar in your bloodstream. It's the hungriest, thirstiest organ you've got, and unlike your stomach or your legs, it cannot save up reserves. It eats what it gets in real time. Cut the supply for 5 minutes, and you don't just feel woozy. You lose cells you cannot grow back. So when we talk about stroke, we're talking about the most fuel-hungry organ in your body suddenly being denied its fuel. That's why every minute matters. Here's what I want you to keep in your head for the next 20 minutes. I call it the 72-hour window. 3 simple ideas, just 3. First, your brain needs a constant supply of blood. Not most of the time, all of the time, every second. Second, most strokes are not surprise events. They're the last page of a story your blood vessels have been writing for 10 or 15 years. Third, before that final page gets written, your body almost always hands you a rough draft, a preview, a short, strange, scary moment that goes away on its own. That preview usually shows up between 3 days and 3 hours before the real thing. That's your window, 72 hours, maybe less. If you remember nothing else from today, remember those 3 ideas. We'll come back to them. All right, 5 warning signs. Let me start with the first one. The first warning is a brief loss of vision in one eye. Not both eyes, one. It doesn't feel like a blur, and it doesn't feel like your reading glasses are smudged. It feels like somebody dropped a piece of gray fabric in front of the eye, or like the eye is suddenly looking through dishwater. It lasts 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes at the outside, and then it clears. Let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret's 71, retired librarian from upstate New York. Still keeps a vegetable garden that gives her more tomatoes than she knows what to do with. Last August, she was out there picking the last of the green beans when her left eye just went out, like a light bulb. She told me later she stood there holding a handful of beans, blinking, thinking maybe she'd caught a piece of pollen. 40 seconds later, it came back. She finished picking the beans. She didn't tell her daughter. She didn't tell me. 3 days later, she had the bigger stroke, right there in her kitchen. She survived. She did the rehab. She's mostly back. But every time she comes in for a follow-up, she says the same thing. I should have called somebody when my eye went dark. Here's what was actually going on in Margaret's eye that morning. There's a big artery in your neck called the carotid that carries blood up from your heart toward your brain. That artery branches several times on its way up. One of those branches goes to your eye. A tiny clot, smaller than a grain of rice, had broken loose from a patch of plaque inside Margaret's carotid, drifted up, and lodged in that eye branch. For 40 seconds, her retina got no blood. Then the clot moved on. Here's the part nobody told her. That clot didn't disappear. It moved on. The next stop for clots like that is often the brain itself. I want you to understand the difference between this and ordinary vision problems. If you've ever stood up too fast and seen sparks or had everything go dim for a moment, that's blood pressure, not a clot. If you wake up with one eye crusted shut or blurry, that's usually just dry eye or sleep. If you get gradual changes across days or weeks, that's something else entirely. What we're talking about here is sudden, in one eye only, lasting under 5 minutes, with clear vision the rest of the day. If that's ever happened to you, even months ago, write it down on a piece of paper. Date, time, how long, which eye. Bring that paper to your doctor and ask about a carotid ultrasound. That's your next step. The second warning sign is when your speech suddenly comes apart at the seams. Now hear me out, because this is not the same as forgetting your neighbor's name at the grocery store. That happens to all of us. You're walking down the produce aisle, you see Linda from down the block. You know her face, you know her dog's name. You cannot for the life of you come up with Linda. That's normal aging. That is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when the machinery of speech itself breaks down for a minute or two. There are 2 patterns to watch for. In the first pattern, you know exactly what you want to say. The words are right there in your head, clear as day. But when you try to push them out, your mouth produces slurred sounds, half words, or nothing at all. It's like your tongue forgot the assignment. People with this pattern often look frustrated, like they're trying to spit out a name they know. In the second pattern, your mouth moves just fine. Words come out smooth and steady. But the words don't connect to each other. You meant to ask your wife where the car keys are, and what came out was something about the dog, and Tuesday, and a lamp. Or somebody asks you a simple question, and you cannot understand what they're saying, even though you can tell they're speaking English. Either pattern, lasting a few minutes and then clearing up, is a warning shot, not a senior moment, a warning shot. Earl's a good example. Earl's 76, retired postal worker from East Tennessee, still drives the same Ford pickup he bought back in 1988. Earl came in to see me last spring because his wife made him come in. He didn't think anything had happened. His wife said over breakfast he looked up from his plate and said something that sounded like Tuesday milk going barn. Just like that. She thought he was joking. He thought he was asking her to pass the butter. It lasted maybe 90 seconds. Then he said pass the butter just fine and ate his eggs. When Earl got to my office, we ran a carotid ultrasound. His right carotid was about 65% blocked. 65. He was a phone call away from the big one, and he had no idea. The mechanism here is simple. There are 2 regions in your brain that handle speech. One sits in the front, behind your left temple, and that one builds the words and sends instructions to your mouth muscles. When that region loses blood flow for a minute, you get slurred or stuck speech. The other sits a little further back, and that one handles meaning, both the meaning of words you hear and the meaning of words you say. When it glitches, you get word salad, or you stop understanding the conversation. Same enemy, different rooms of the same house. How do you tell the difference between this and ordinary tip-of-the-tongue moments? Easy. With ordinary aging, the rest of the sentence works fine. You just can't find one word. With a real warning, the whole structure breaks. Either the mouth won't cooperate, or the sentences come out scrambled, or you can't follow what someone else is saying. And it's sudden. 1 minute you're fine, the next minute you're not. If that's happened to anyone in your house, even once, get it checked. Now before I tell you about the third warning, the one I said would surprise you, let me pause here. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you. This material matters, and I appreciate you taking it seriously. If this video is making sense, tap the like button. It tells YouTube to show this to other folks your age who might need to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, that's the goal we're working toward together. 100,000 subscribers. Drop a comment below telling me which warning sign you'd never heard of before. I read those, and I use them to plan future videos. Now, the third warning. The one I promised would catch you off guard. It's going to sound like it has nothing to do with stroke at all. skin changes paired with a new kind of headache. I know, bear with me. Some of you have seen patches of pale skin show up on your hands or your face as the years went by. The medical name for that is vitiligo. The pigment cells in those patches stopped working. What most doctors don't tell their patients, and what I think people deserve to know, is that vitiligo is an autoimmune condition. That means your own immune system attacked those pigment cells like they were invaders. Here's the thing about autoimmune conditions. They almost never stay in one place. The same immune system that decided to attack pigment cells in your skin can quietly attack the lining of your blood vessels at the same time. That lining is called the endothelium. It's a single layer of cells, thinner than a sheet of paper, that coats the inside of every artery you have. When it's healthy, blood slides past it like water across a clean window. When it's inflamed and scarred, every kind of debris in your blood starts sticking to it. Cholesterol, platelets, old cells. They cling to those rough patches, and over time, those patches grow into plaques. So someone with long-standing vitiligo isn't doomed to a stroke, but they often have inflamed arteries that nobody's bothered to check. Add in a new pattern of headaches, and we have a problem worth investigating. Now I need to be careful here, because most headaches in folks over 60 aren't from blood vessels. A lot of headaches in this age group come from the neck. The little joints between the second and third vertebrae of your spine wear down with age, and they can refer pain up into the back of the skull. Some folks have a disc problem in their neck that's been there for years. Those headaches are real, but they're not stroke warnings. The headaches I'm worried about are different. They're new. You've never had headaches like this before. They're stronger than your usual ones. They show up in places your usual headaches don't. They wake you up at night. They don't respond to your regular over-the-counter pill the way they used to. Doris fits this picture. Doris is 68, retired hairdresser from a little town in the Missouri Ozarks, sings second soprano in her church choir every Sunday morning. Doris developed small white patches on the backs of her hands in her late 50s. Her doctor told her it was cosmetic, not to worry about it. Last winter, she started getting these splitting headaches behind her right ear, the kind she'd never had before. Her doctor gave her stronger pain pills. Nobody connected the two. When she finally came to me, on the advice of her daughter who watches this channel, we ran a carotid ultrasound and a blood test for inflammation. Both lit up. Her right carotid had a significant plaque growing. The inflammation was high. We caught it before the stroke happened. She's on the right treatment now. Hair color came back in 2 of the patches, by the way. Sometimes inflammation runs both ways. Now here's the angle I want to add, and this is the piece most cardiology videos miss entirely. Stroke warnings can look very different in women than in men. Men tend to get the textbook stuff, the eye blackout, the arm numbness, the dropped speech. Women sometimes get all of those too, but they also get warnings that look like nothing at all. Sudden, overwhelming tiredness for no reason, with a strange feeling in the head, brief nausea without any stomach problem, a sudden change in mood, an unexplained spell of confusion that lasts 10 minutes. These get written off as menopause symptoms, or anxiety, or just having a bad day. They're often the only warning a woman gets. If you're a woman watching this, or you're a husband watching with your wife in the room, please understand. The 5 signs I'm walking you through are the most reliable ones, but if she ever describes a strange 10-minute episode where something just felt deeply wrong, take it seriously. Don't wait for her to fit the textbook. The 4th warning sign is a sudden loss of coordination, or, to put it the way people actually describe it, a drunk walk without the drinks. Here's what it looks like. You're walking through your living room toward the kitchen. Flat carpet, familiar route. You've done it 10,000 times. Suddenly, one foot lands in the wrong spot. You stumble. You catch yourself on the back of the couch. You stand still for a few seconds and you feel fine, so you keep going. Or you reach to pick up a glass of water and your hand goes slightly wide of the glass. Or you turn your head and the whole room spins for 10 seconds, even though you're standing still. The part of your brain that keeps you upright and coordinated sits in a little bulb at the base of your skull called the cerebellum. Picture a small second brain tucked under the main one. It does the math, second by second, for everything from walking a straight line to bringing a fork to your mouth. The blood that feeds the cerebellum comes up the back of your neck through arteries that pass through the bones of your spine. When the flow through those back arteries dips for a few seconds, the cerebellum loses the math, and you stagger or veer or feel like the floor tilted. Earl had another moment his wife mentioned to me, one he'd forgotten about until she brought it up in the office. The week before the breakfast incident, he'd been carrying a basket of laundry across the hall, and his left foot just landed wrong. He stumbled, caught himself on the door frame, stood there for a second wondering what happened, and then walked on like nothing did. Maybe 85 seconds, then gone. He didn't think about it again until his wife reminded him. That was Earl's brain telling him the back arteries were in trouble too. He didn't connect the laundry stumble with the breakfast slur. Why would he? They felt unrelated. They weren't. I want you to be careful not to confuse this with ordinary dizziness. If you roll over in bed and the room spins for 30 seconds because your inner ear is giving you trouble, that's not what I'm describing. If you stand up from a chair and feel lightheaded for 5 seconds, that's low blood pressure, not a stroke warning. The thing I'm describing is sudden. It happens during normal walking or sitting, and it's the body refusing to do something it usually does without thinking. If you've had an episode like that, mention it to your doctor. Don't dress it up. Don't say I had a little spell. Say my brain stopped knowing where my foot was for a minute. Be that specific. The fifth warning sign is sudden numbness or tingling, almost always on one side of the body. Pins and needles in one hand. A whole arm that feels like it's wrapped in cotton. Half a face that's gone rubbery. One leg that won't quite respond. The key word is sudden. The other key word is one-sided. Folks at home, here's something most people don't know about how the brain is wired. The left side of your brain controls the right side of your body, and the right side controls the left. When a stroke or a warning hits one side of the brain, you feel it on the opposite side of your body. That's why almost every real warning shows up on one side and not the other. If both your hands tingle evenly, that's almost always a neck problem or a circulation problem in the spine, not a brain problem. How long does it last in a warning? Anywhere from 30 seconds to about 10 minutes. Then it goes away completely, and you wonder if you imagined it. Don't talk yourself into thinking you imagined it. Margaret, the librarian I told you about, had another episode I haven't mentioned. A week before her vision went dark in the garden, she was sitting in her recliner watching the evening news. Her right hand suddenly felt like it was wrapped in a thick wool sock. She couldn't grip the remote properly for about 4 minutes. Then it cleared. She figured she'd been holding her arm at an odd angle. She hadn't. That was warning number 1. The eye was warning number 2. The big stroke was the third event. She'd been given 2 chances and didn't know to take them. Slept on your arm wrong and lost feeling? That comes back when you move. It feels different. Sat too long in the same position and your foot fell asleep? Stand up, walk around. It clears. Those are nerve compressions, and they make sense for the position you were in. What I'm talking about happens out of nowhere, sitting at the table, standing at the counter, watching the news. One side of your body just clocks out for a few minutes. If that's ever happened, that's the strongest single reason on this list to call your doctor and ask about a stroke workup. All right, 5 warnings down. Now let me tie them all together, because there's a single thread running through all of them, and once you see it, the rest makes sense. Every one of those 5 warnings comes from the same root problem: damage to the inside of your blood vessels. Specifically, damage to that paper-thin lining I mentioned earlier, the endothelium. Healthy endothelium is like the inside of a brand new garden hose. Slick, smooth, nothing sticks. Damaged endothelium is like an old hose that's been sitting in the sun for 10 summers. Cracked, rough. Stuff gets caught in those cracks. Once stuff starts catching, it builds up. What damages the endothelium? I'm going to give you a fresh way to think about the 2 biggest culprits. The first is high blood sugar. You don't have to be a diabetic to have endothelial damage from sugar. Plenty of folks walking around with blood sugar that's just a little too high are damaging their vessels every single day. Sugar molecules in the bloodstream act like tiny pieces of grit. They bump into the inside of your arteries millions of times an hour. Each bump is nothing. 1 million bumps a day, over 20 years, is everything. By the time someone gets the official diabetes label, their vessels have been sandpapered down for 10 or 15 years already. The second is cigarettes. I won't lecture anybody on smoking. You know my position. But you should know what nicotine and the other chemicals actually do. They do 2 things at once. They burn the inside of your blood vessels, the way a too-hot iron can scorch a shirt. And they thicken your blood so it moves more like maple syrup than water. Imagine syrup pushing through a sandpapered hose. Clots form. That's why smokers have 2 to 4 times the stroke risk of non-smokers with otherwise similar numbers. Now here's where I'm going to surprise you again, because most folks have the next piece completely backwards. Most folks think strokes happen when blood pressure shoots up. Yes, high blood pressure over years does the most long-term damage to your vessels. But here's the twist. The actual stroke often happens when blood pressure drops, not when it spikes. Picture an artery that's already half blocked by plaque. As long as your blood pressure is up around its usual level, blood still squeezes past the blockage. But your blood pressure naturally drops at night when you sleep. It drops about 15%. For most folks, that's no problem. If you've got a serious blockage that nobody's caught yet, that nighttime drop can take that artery from a trickle to nothing. That's why so many folks lie down in good health at the end of the day and find themselves unable to speak by morning or get found by family at sunrise. The stroke happened around 3 or 4 in the morning when the pressure bottomed out. That's the counterintuitive piece. High pressure causes the damage. Low pressure can trigger the event. Both ends matter. All right, we've covered a lot. Let me give you the practical part now, the part you can actually take with you. If anything I've described has happened to you, even once, even months ago, here are the 3 tests you should bring up with your doctor at your next appointment. You don't have to know all the science, you just have to know the names. The first is called a carotid duplex ultrasound. That's a painless scan of the 2 big arteries in your neck. No needles, no radiation. The technician runs a wand on your neck for about 15 minutes. It tells your doctor exactly how much plaque you have in those arteries, and how fast the blood is moving past any narrow spots. If the narrowing is over 70%, there's a real surgery that can clean the artery out and dramatically reduce your stroke risk. That surgery has saved more lives than most folks realize. Ask about a carotid duplex ultrasound. Write that down. The second test is called hemoglobin A1C, sometimes written as HbA1c. It's a single blood draw. What makes it special is that it tells you what your blood sugar has been doing for the last 3 months, not just this morning. You can't fool it by skipping breakfast. If your A1C comes back at 5.7 or higher, you're in the gray zone called pre-diabetes, where damage is already happening, even though nobody's called you a diabetic yet. If it's 6.5 or higher, you cross into diabetes. This single test catches more silent damage than almost anything else. Ask for an A1C. The third test is called Holter monitoring. That's a small device about the size of a deck of cards that you wear for 24 hours. It records every single heartbeat you make for a full day. The reason matters. There's a heart rhythm problem called atrial fibrillation, AFib for short, that comes and goes. In AFib, the top chambers of your heart stop pumping in a steady beat and start quivering instead. Blood pools up there and clots form. Those clots fire out of the heart and head straight for the brain. AFib causes some of the worst strokes there are. A regular 10-second EKG in the office often misses it. A 24-hour Holter usually catches it. If you've had any unusual fluttering in your chest, any sense that your heart is racing for no reason, ask about Holter monitoring. 3 tests: carotid duplex, hemoglobin A1C, Holter monitor. Write them down. Bring the list to your next appointment. One more thing, because I see this every week in my practice. If you ever experience one of those 5 warnings, do not drive yourself anywhere. Do not take an aspirin without talking to a doctor first. About 15% of strokes are the bleeding kind, and an aspirin in that situation makes things much worse, not better. Sit down. Lie down if you can, flat with a small pillow under your feet. Have somebody call your doctor or call for help. Don't try to push through it. Don't wait it out. Let me close with this. After the age of 60, healthcare isn't supposed to be about being a passive passenger. It's supposed to be a conversation between you and a doctor who respects what you've lived through and listens when you describe what your body is telling you. You have every right to ask for the tests I mentioned today. You have every right to ask a doctor to explain things to you in plain English. You have every right to seek a second opinion. And you have every right to walk into an appointment with a written list of questions and not leave until you understand the answers. The 5 warnings we covered today: brief vision loss in one eye, speech that comes apart for no reason, skin changes paired with new headaches, sudden coordination loss, and one-sided numbness. Those are not random events. They are your brain writing you a letter, a short, urgent letter, saying the same thing every time. Pay attention now while there's still time. If this video helped you understand something better, take a second to tap like and subscribe. We're working toward 100,000 subscribers, and every one of you watching helps get the word out to folks who need to hear it. Drop me a comment below. Tell me which of the 5 signs surprised you most, or share a story from your own life if something like this has happened. I read every comment. Next week, I'm going to walk you through something that worries me as much as silent strokes. Silent heart attacks in people over 65. The kind that show up without chest pain. Most folks have never heard what those actually feel like. I'll see you then. Take care of yourselves. Take those 72 hours seriously when your body hands them to you.